Я ухожу.
И в сортире их замочим, в конце концов.
Свобода лучше, чем не свобода.
Крым и Севастополь возвращаются в родную гавань.
Welcome to InfoCom. In the new episode of Focus on Russia, our guest is Sossi Tatakyan, an expert in international relations and security. Sossi, thank you for accepting our invitation.
Thank you very much for this opportunity.
I would like to discuss today the recent developments around the Lachin corridor, as well as developments around the region, Armenia-Azerbaijan relations, and let's try to look at these developments a bit from the Russian angle, but also overall try to understand what is happening in our region. So one of the main questions that has been bothering the Armenian society in the last month is the inaction of the Russian peacekeeping force in the Lachin corridor and in Nagorno-Karabakh itself. There is lots of criticism about the inability of the peacekeeping force to resolve the crisis, to open the blocked road. What is your assessment of their actions?
This is really a key question, and I am always looking at this question from my experience in peacekeeping missions, because I've served in several peacekeeping missions of the UN and OSCE. So basically, we know that Russian peacekeeping has no international mandate, and it consists of one nation, and it's purely military. And those three factors, together with the current geopolitical, extremely complex environment, results in this, whether it's inaction or unwillingness, it's not entirely clear without any evidence. But let's look at it. When these protests, so-called protests, pseudo-fake protests started, I tended to find a justification for the inaction of Russian peacekeepers. And I'll explain how. In international peacekeeping, it's actually a very complex architecture. It consists of more than one nation, very often more than one organization, and it may have military, police, and civilian components. Here we have one nation and we have only military component. And normally, rule of law issues such as protests are not dealt by the military component. For instance, if there is a protest in Kosovo, it's not the KFOR that is dealing with it. Before it was UN police, and then it became EULEX, which is European Union rule of law mission. Here we have none. And it's very problematic for a military component to apply military force to protesters, both in national context, as we know, and also in international context. So I was trying to look at it from this perspective, thinking that maybe that's the reason they are not doing it, because if they use military force towards civilian protesters, even if now it has been proven that those protesters are not purely civilian, because there are many military and special forces representatives amongst them in civilian clothes. However, the situation has evolved, and now it's very difficult to understand it, because now we see videos from Azeri media that those protesters are not only partially military and special services, but there are official special services who are guarding their security. We have seen those videos. And yesterday's incident is quite shocking. This incident when basically Russian peacekeepers allow some Azerbaijani men, it's not clear who they are, whether they are pseudo-protesters or they are special forces, special security services. They allow them to enter the vehicle with 16 kids and harass them and intimidate and literally spread psychological terror towards them. This cannot be justified by any rule of peacekeeping. This could not have happened. And I cannot recall any incident from my experience where something like this has happened. If some civilians are accompanied by peacekeepers, they cannot be stopped and inspected by any local services or protesters or whoever. And if I don't think those people are protesters, I assume that they are special services. And the question is why they have been allowed to be there to begin with, if there is no any agreement between the Armenian side, whether it's Armenia or Nagorno-Karabakh side, Azerbaijan and Russia, that to establish some kind of oversight by Azerbaijani services, which, as we know, is a red line for the Armenian side. And this incident explains why. Because for sure, if there is any kind of Azerbaijani control on the corridor, they will use it to intimidate, harass, abuse anybody who is going from Armenia to Nagorno-Karabakh or back, whether it's a citizen of Armenia or it's Nagorno-Karabakh Armenian, and it will just result in complete disruption of the link between Nagorno-Karabakh and Armenia. And I was watching actually an interview, Facebook Memories brought it to me last night. It has happened exactly 2 years ago on this day, Lavrov's interview, where he was saying that the link between Nagorno-Karabakh and Armenia was always underlined in all documents during all 27 years of negotiations, and it hasn't changed after 2020 ceasefire statement. There is no any justification to try to disrupt the link between Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh, because it basically means to force Nagorno-Karabakh Armenians to refuse from their national identity. It's much more than demand that they become an Azerbaijani citizens. It basically means that it's a demand to them to become Azerbaijanis, to refuse from their ethnic identity, from the link to Armenia, which cannot be justified under any provision of international law. So I think Azerbaijan is violating all red lines, and unfortunately, I don't see how Russian peacekeepers prevent them to do so. And okay, international mandate issue. So international peacekeeping.
Yeah, I'll come to that question. That was actually my second question. And I absolutely agree with your points that the latest horrendous incident shows that it is unacceptable to have any kind of Azerbaijani checkpoints in the Lachin corridor, and Azerbaijan, it seems, does everything to prove the point we have been trying to explain to our international partners. Yeah, so you have already touched upon the issue of international mandate, and the Armenian government as well has been making statements on that issue. Prime Minister Pashinyan has already said on a number of occasions that if Russia is not capable of fulfilling its commitments, it should apply to the UN Security Council for some kind of international mandate, or probably for some kind of international peacekeeping force. How realistic is that? Is there a realistic scenario that Russia applies to the UN Security Council for an international mandate? And if it does, what is the possibility that they will be given this mandate?
This is really the key question, because I strongly believe that the only way to resolve the current very severe situation in Nagorno-Karabakh is indeed an international peacekeeping mission. However, statements coming from both Armenia and Nagorno-Karabakh have been very confusing, because there were two narratives. The first one is to give international mandate to Russian peacekeepers, and the second is to have international peacekeeping mission there. And those are two very different things. The first one, I think it's just a wrong narrative, because to my knowledge, as somebody who has served in international peacekeeping missions as a political and security advisor, one nation cannot receive an international mandate as a sole actor in peacekeeping. It's just, I cannot recall any precedent. Yeah, okay, there have been some unilateral short-term peacekeeping or rather peace enforcement arrangements, such as the French in Africa. I've witnessed it in Central African Republic in the middle of civil war, just to stop the genocide. However, even they have been deployed based on international mandate from the UN Security Council, and they haven't been declared as the sole and permanent actor in international peacekeeping. Peacekeeping architecture should not be static. It should evolve dependent on the situation. The situation changes all the time, and I witnessed in other missions how the actors have changed. First it could be some unilateral actor, then it could be African Union, then it could be European Union, then it could be UN mission, dependent on the situation. Now we have only Russians, and who said that they should remain the only actor there? They could become part of international peacekeeping mission, because if there is a UN mandate, which authorizes an establishment of an international peacekeeping mission, Russia can become one nation in this overall peacekeeping architecture. It can even be the biggest actor, the biggest contributor. Like it can, for instance, continue to ensure hard security, and then other nations or other organizations such as OSCE or European Union, now I am talking in hypothetical terms, can become other actors, and there should be a cooperation between different actors. Now, how realistic is this? Well, this is very difficult given the current geopolitical situation, polarization between Russia and the West in particular, in light of the Ukraine war. And also, as we saw, Russia is considered to be the main country that has not allowed the UN Security Council statement to be issued. There are, of course, different views on this, and Russia has made a statement. However, this is the leading narrative. And my question would be why Russia would block it, because I think it should be actually of Russia's interest to go to the Security Council itself and say, okay, the situation is more severe than it was assumed 2 years ago because of Azerbaijani rhetoric and very aggressive military actions. And let's establish a UN peacekeeping mission together with other actors. And I am ready to be, let's say, the biggest contributor. But if Russia is one of the actors, it will also give legitimacy for it to, let's say, use force when it's necessary, when Azerbaijani armed forces try to make new military advances. And if there is another actor that ensures the police rule of law component, they can deal with this kind of protesters and rule of law issues. And finally, international peacekeeping has all those other components like political affairs, leading to reconciliation and political dialogue, humanitarian, leading to issues related to displaced people and refugees, human rights issues that are becoming very explicit now, and also development programs and humanitarian issues in line with two very important principles of the UN. First, responsibility to protect civilians, and the second, leave no one behind. And it's really the responsibility of international community to start applying those two principles in relation to Nagorno-Karabakh Armenians, because I'm sorry, this has become a gray zone, and it's not because of the local people, but because international community haven't been able to find ways to step up.
Yeah, I totally agree with you that in an ideal world, that probably will be the scenario to move forward with. However, we know that the Russians are trying to regionalize all the processes, are trying to restrict and neutralize Western influences in our region. So practically, it will be very difficult to achieve that goal. But hopefully things can change. We see that after the outbreak of the war in Ukraine, certain things that seem to be impossible now are becoming possible, and we'll probably discuss later some of these processes that were considered impossible, let's say 6 months ago, but now they are being implemented. The third question I would like to ask is about the possibility of sending a UN fact-finding mission to the Lachin corridor. The Armenian government has been trying to communicate this goal with different UN bodies, and on the level of public statements, the Prime Minister and other officials have been saying that there is a need to send a fact-finding mission. How plausible is it to send a fact-finding mission to the Lachin corridor without Azerbaijan's consent?
First of all, this is a very practical and important short-term objective, and Armenian authorities are right to request this kind of fact-finding mission. Any kind of UN missions in the past have been blocked because of one issue, whether they should enter from Aghdam or Lachin. Mm-hmm. And in the current situation, I find this problem very outdated and very technical, and I cannot believe that there cannot be a solution for that. So, of course, as we have seen, Azerbaijan will try to obstruct any kind of international presence, because the Azerbaijani position is that not only it declares that it doesn't want any military presence in what it considers its territory, including Nagorno-Karabakh, but it also has objections to any international civilian presence. And Azerbaijan has been stating this all over again, and for some reason, international community hasn't been reacting to this statement, which is basically against any international norms. I think that international community should become much more robust in its statements to Azerbaijan and messages, including the United States, European Union, the UN, because this position of impartiality doesn't mean neutrality. I want to be very clear, and this also relates to peacekeeping. So one of the three key principles of international peacekeeping is impartiality. Impartiality doesn't mean neutrality. The only organization that is really supposed to be neutral is ICRC, because that's the only way they can act in such kind of complicated environments. But any other organization, such as the UN or EU, they need to be impartial, but it doesn't mean not to condemn the party that is violating international law. And Azerbaijan is violating the international law constantly on everyday basis by now. So I believe that international community should be tougher on Azerbaijan. It should realize that Azerbaijan is bluntly violating any kind of international principles and norms. And major actors such as the US, European Union, UN should be tougher on Azerbaijan, because these neutral statements, which are called as both-sidist, don't work. I was really satisfied to hear statements by the US, European Union, France, and some other countries at the OSCE Permanent Council yesterday. They were quite clear, and I hope that this dynamic will evolve.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And my last question is about the EU monitoring mission. There is a high possibility that a new mission will be sent to the Armenia-Azerbaijan border, a long-term mission. What could you tell us about this mission, and how can it stabilize the situation on the ground?
Well, I've seen this kind of mission under a common security and defense policy framework of the European Union in Kosovo and in Central African Republic. In Kosovo, it was rule of law mission, and in Central African Republic, it was first a peacekeeping force, and then it turned into a defense advisory mission. Now, the mission in Armenia will be different. It will be civilian. Why? I believe for three reasons. First, because of the Russian presence. Second, because we have Iran as a border, as a neighbor. And third, finally, Azerbaijan's reaction to it. So I think that even if it's going to be a civilian mission, it can play a very important role in decreasing tensions and eventually preventing violation of Armenia's territorial integrity, as it has been happening over the last 1.5 years, even more. As we know, as of now, Azerbaijan has annexed 148 square kilometers of Armenian territory, meaning Armenia proper. This is not related to Nagorno-Karabakh. And I believe that in the reality, it may be even more. I think the official number doesn't include things that Armenia conceded under political and military blackmail, such as Kapangori's highway, which was in fact highly disputed, and Armenia could simply take it to international court of justice instead of just giving away. So I think that Armenia had this naive perception until the last several months that if it makes concessions, there will be peace and Azerbaijan will stop its demands. But as we saw, what happened was exactly the opposite. Azerbaijan became increasingly aggressive, and it has been making completely unreasonable, increasing demands to Armenia instead of appreciating Armenia's very soft and reconciliatory behavior over the last 2 years. So now EU mission will be typical demonstration of soft power. So basically, it will be perhaps a maximum 100 staff, civilians, which may include retired military or police officers, I assume from my experience, because normally if you have this kind of mission, some civilians may be retired ex-uniform personnel who have deep expertise in, let's say, border security issues, and they may give a good advice in delimitation and demarcation, as well as contribute to confidence building measures and to reduce the tensions in the border areas. I strongly believe that the EU mandate should include human security issues, which basically means that those monitors should go and talk to local municipal authorities and even regular people, citizens in border regions, to see their increased human security concerns after the ceasefire statement, after Azerbaijani armed forces made advances in border regions of Armenia. And even if it seems that if it's just like, let's say, 60 or 80 civilian personnel, how can they prevent Azerbaijani military advances? Well, they can, because they are legitimate. They have an international mandate from the European Union. Hopefully they will have, because they should still vote, so it's not approved. They should still go 1 or 2 layers of approval, and hopefully no EU member country would veto this. We are very hopeful for this. And just their legitimacy will be kind of a guarantee for their role.
Yeah, great, Sossi. Thanks a lot for your insights.
Thank you very much for this talk.